This is the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, Show 84, How to Create a Rock-Solid Relationship with Stacey and Paul Martino.
Of course, making time for conversations and having family systems so that your children are in bed by a certain time so that you can be in bed by a certain time, being able to have caregiving so that you have date nights, and all of those things are certainly strategic tools. But if your days are running by the seat of your pants, trying to align inside the moment on the fly, those kinds of things are Band-Aids that just aren't enough. You have to set a solid, rock-solid foundation.
Hi, Ariana here with a quick PSA about why this topic is so important to us. Tom and I know how challenging it can be to start and run a business, to take care of your loved ones, and on top of it all, to keep a healthy relationship with your spouse. It isn't easy, and that is why we created our Lifestyle Builders Mentorship Program. As a special offer during this very special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. So if you, and your spouse is welcome too, need more strategy, support, and guidance in your business and life, plus people who truly care about you and will keep you accountable, sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the code LBcouples. All right, a little bit more about our special guests before we dive into the show. Stacey and Paul Martino have proven that it only takes one partner to transform a relationship. Any relationship. The Martinos are on a mission to empower people to get the unshakable love and unleashed passion they want in their relationship, even if their partner refuses to change. Stacey and Paul are the founders of relationshipdevelopment.org and creators of Relationship U. Through the revolutionary relationship development methodology, they are changing the way relationship is done. Today, through their strategic coaching, online programs, and sold-out live events, Stacey and Paul have helped save thousands of marriages around the world by working with only one spouse. Trained and certified by Tony Robbins, Stacey is a certified marriage educator, divorce preventionist, and strategic interventionist. As a 6-time best-selling author, Stacey is a sought-after relationship expert and is the relationship expert for Aspire magazine. All right, I don't know about you, but this episode was, what did we say? It was synergy. There was a lot of synergy in it. Just talking to Stacey and Paul and a lot of the things that we already talk about in Lifestyle Builders and just in general in our messaging was just very much aligned with a lot of what Stacey and Paul do.
Yeah, and the timing of this is perfect, because we just had all these conversations with entrepreneurial couples. And I'm guessing that there's a handful of people that are like, that's great. I'm hearing all these success stories. I'm hearing what works and what doesn't. But how do I go about getting started, especially maybe if my spouse isn't on board or, if I've got some of these different things going on. And, we cover so much of that in this conversation.
Yeah, we talk about just some of the issues that everyone has in a relationship and how you can show up differently to kind of take some of the energy back from those issues or struggles that often come up. With parenting, with being married, and then if you're in business together and entrepreneurs. So I really think there was a lot of great takeaways for people to go and start implementing right now.
Well, and the whole thing is obviously this will help your marriage, but the strategies and the things that we talk about will help every relationship you have, relationships with your employees, relationships with your customers, relationships with other people in life,
Family
so there's
friends.
There's just a lot of good information here for you to take to not only improve your relationships, but also to improve yourself.
And with that, we will let you enjoy. All right, you guys, welcome back to the Lifestyle Builders Podcast. Today, we have some super special guests on. We've got Stacey and Paul Martino with us. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, guys. Great to see you.
And we are so very excited to talk with you guys because last month, September, we had couples on all month long. It was our Couples and Entrepreneurship series. And you guys are a perfect guest to have on right after that series has ended because you do relationship development, which I want to tell people a little bit of why that's different because you're not therapists, but you coach and mentor people on how to show up and have the relationship of their dreams. And I love that because we work with a lot of entrepreneurs and we are entrepreneurs. So we know that can be a really big struggle for a lot of people when they jump into this space where the spouses are like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. What do you mean funnels and landing pages and email software? I have no idea what you're saying. So tell us a little bit about how you guys got into doing that. How did you get into helping entrepreneurs in their relationships?
Oh my. I will just start. I'll say not willingly, not on my part. I know he's like,
very much alike.
Yeah. I like to say I was dragged kicking and screaming, but basically over 18 years, Paul and I have been together almost 25 years, and about almost 18 years ago, our relationship was over. Paul was walking out the door. And in a moment of desperation, which I am now so grateful for, I came to this understanding that I don't know how to do this, because I couldn't disagree with any of the things that he was saying about why our relationship isn't working. I'm like, okay, yes, those are all true, and not actually the first time I've heard those things before, and I don't know how to do this. So I begged my husband for one more chance, not knowing if anything I did would save our relationship, but being committed to figuring out, like, thank goodness, right? I was a personal development junkie kind of person. I'm like, if anybody has figured this out, I'm going to find out. And dove headfirst into like everything I could about men, women, relationships, intimacy, and all of that to figure out and hopefully save our relationship. But even if I couldn't, I knew I never wanted to be blindsided again with that kind of pain, and B, I really wanted to figure out how to do relationship, because it turns out that being in love is really worth it. It's worth going through whatever it takes, because love really is that amazing. And so thank God I did, because my journey actually did end up saving our relationship. And as we then dove in together to create what we now call our unshakable love and unleashed passion, it was Paul really who started when we had children, had an experience that really sent him home to me to tell me about what we were going to do next.
Yeah, so we had a long journey, and then there was one day where we were seeing the sort of decay of relationships everywhere, because once you see it with clarity, you can see the dynamics everywhere. So it was one day I'm dropping off my son at school, and he was really young. He was like about 4 at the time. And one of his friends, I was dropping him off, and one of his friends' parents that we knew, they were getting divorced. And it just kind of struck me at that one day where I'm like, we can't just sit back and watch. Like, when we know what to do, and we sit back and see these things going on, thinking, well, what are we going to do? Or, why would we step into their marriage and tell them what to do, and keeping a distance from it. It really sunk in that it's almost like watching someone walk towards an open manhole cover everywhere you go, and not saying anything, like not saying, hey, stop. So it really kind of haunted me, kind of stayed with me, gnawing at me. And then one night I'm talking to Stacey. I'm like, so here's what happened today. And I really think that, we can't not do something about this. Like, we're very capable people. And we can't just sit back and watch this anymore. And at first, Stacey's like, look, the last thing I want to do is get into people's marriages at all. And me too. I mean, neither one of us wanted to get into this realm. But at the same time, we know that what we see with clarity is the kind of thing that could have saved these other people. So it was like a journey from there too, so if we're going to do this, how do we do this? Reaching out to mentors, figuring out how we can actually turn this into something where we can help more than just a handful of people in a year, and really make a difference here. So it was reluctant on both of our parts, definitely on Stacey's part too, but thank God, with the effort and wisdom, Stacey's, incredible energy and focus, that we're able to be doing what we're doing now for thousands of people. So
it was truly a calling, and we felt like no matter what we did, it just turns out that there is no relationship that we can't handle. And you can't just sit by and watch children suffering in homes when we know that if they had just learned what we learned, those kids might not be sleeping down the hall. Those kids might be sleeping down the hall from 2 parents tonight, instead of trying to figure out how to navigate 2 different households. And not every marriage is meant to last, but a lot of them actually can be healed. They are ending unnecessarily with a lot of unnecessary suffering. And we just felt like we couldn't continue to go on without doing something about it. That's how we ended up here.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and it was actually kind of similar for us because, we started with our couple first businesses, which weren't related to coaching at all. And then as we got into business coaching, which we're really good at, the one thing that we realized, like some of our early clients, we help them have huge success in business, and some of them are divorced now. And like we, as we kind of were talking about like who we wanted to work with and continue refining that, we're like, we can't just help people build a successful business, especially because a lot of the people we talk to are like, hey, why do you want to build a business? Well, so I can spend more time with my family. Yet they were sacrificing their family to build the business. And we're like, we can't hold our integrity if we're not helping people also build the life and the relationship in addition to the business.
Yeah, we have a lot of people very confused when they come to us because the first thing we send them to is like a life vision exercise with their spouse and, kind of looking at it like, what do you want your life to look like? They're like, why are you sending me this? I came to you for business coaching. We're like, listen, this is how we do things here.
Yes, absolutely.
Got to get the life stuff in check before you try to go and build a business, because down the road somewhere that is going to cause issues if you haven't done it. And I mean, we see it all the time with the spouses. People are like, oh, my spouse just doesn't understand. And we take them back 10 years to like, that was me. Mm-hmm. I was that spouse that didn't understand. And it took us a while to figure out why we weren't gelling on that. And now, we tell people like, you have to let your spouse have their space and give them the right tools to work with as you're jumping into this entrepreneurial journey, because they haven't had all the same moments that you have. They haven't had all the same thoughts. They haven't had the epiphanies to know why you're so excited about this, why this is so important to you. And, once we start talking through that with people, then they begin to understand like, oh, maybe I didn't go into that conversation with the best wording or the best responses, but it takes somebody to show you how you're showing up before you kind of can see it sometimes, which I know is really, really tough.
Amen. It's absolutely true. Yeah. And we also find that when it comes to business and money tend to be a magnifier. So if your relationship was shaky and you weren't exactly on the same page and rock solid before, it's only going to magnify that as more and more and more things come up. But if you're rock solid in your relationship, you'll be rock solid as you navigate entrepreneurship as well.
And good for you both too, because you're really giving them the wisdom and foresight that they needed up front, where it wasn't on their radar, obviously. And Stacey has this great phrase, and she said, "The thermostat." You want to say the phrase, the thermostat?
Oh, the thermostat on your business is actually the invisible thermostat on your business is the thermostat, the level of support you have in your relationship, because that's just about as far as you'll be willing to take your business without risking losing the support of your partner.
Yeah. I love that.
So I'm curious, because this was something I struggled with for so long. I knew that I didn't want I didn't like the path we were on, which was massive debt, like graduating college, not finding jobs we wanted, being away from each other. So I had the epiphany of like, I'm going to retire by 35. We're going to retire by 35. And I set out to do that. Ariana was not on board, and it took a long time to get her there. How do you guys help people when you find one spouse wants to do something and the other one just isn't on board?
Yeah, well, typically it's not what most people think, because most people start with the "how do I get my partner" question. And you don't. That's the answer. The simple answer is you don't. You don't ever get anybody to do anything because you don't like it when people try to get you to do anything either. It just doesn't work. However, very often what's missing is first understanding, like, what is their vision? What is their dream? What is their why? Just like you already started with. We ask people the same thing, like, well, when you look at their resistance to what it is you want to do, what are their needs? What are their fears? There are specifics. You're at this level having this conversation, and they're white knuckling. There's a reason why they're white knuckling, and you can solve that reason without giving up on your dream. But you have to be willing to go through the uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. And very often the entrepreneur with the dream doesn't realize that their partner is white knuckling to the same level of intensity that they're white knuckling on the other end of their dream.
That's how the world works.
Because they're so afraid that if their partner picks anything apart, they're going to have to give up on opening that business, or give up on that mentorship program, or give up on going to that live event, or give up on anything. So they're white knuckling, and your partner will always pull at the same level of intensity that you're pulling your white knuckle. So it's truly about first of all, using the right strategies, but being willing to navigate something that most people are afraid to do, which is have a vulnerable conversation where, okay, I'm not attached to anything but being in love with you. Now, from that place, let's talk about what your needs are, what my needs are, what our dreams are, and what our fears are, and let's just collaborate until we get it.
I love that.
Well, I was going to say, and that was exactly the work that we had to go through.
Amen.
It took us a while to figure it out.
Yeah, well, and you know, like a big thing I was doing, and in retrospect that we figured out was, you know, I kept telling her like what I wanted to do, right? Like I told her I wanted to start a real estate business. I wanted to do this thing. And as you said, she was white knuckling back. And it wasn't until we stepped back and started talking about why. We started talking
there you go.
about, you know, we each did it. And then we started pulling them together. And I mean, like,
they were the same.
90% of it was
Almost
the same.
every time,
It really
right?
is.
But,
What's ironic about it? Yeah.
but it wasn't until we stepped back and had that. And then once we were aligned on the vision, then it's like, okay, well, what are the steps to get there? And then what roles are we each going to play on that? And everything else became so much easier once we had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Amen.
for years, I was just pushing, and she was resisting.
It's so beautiful. And you can apply that same methodology to everything, whether it's money or parenting or where you're going to live or what's going on with the in-laws, any aspect in your relationship. If you back up and start with the whys, you know, you love your partner, you respect your partner, you saw great things in your partner when you fell in love, you can almost always align on the whys. And once you do find alignment on the whys, the hows and the whats seem to be very flexible from that point, because you find that you have trust that your why is in your partner's heart. And if your why is in your partner's heart, then you trust them to go and act in the world.
Yeah, well, and even like you said, like that whole principle of like seek first to understand, when like we've seen it with, I think just about every person we've worked with, when somebody's resisting, it's because they typically have a fear. And most entrepreneurs are just pushing and not asking. And once you it's the same thing with sales. It's the same thing with anything else. The more you know and understand of like what those objections are, the more you can now work to figure out like, is this something that we can work through? Do we got to shift direction? But I find more often than not, when people are struggling, it's because they don't understand the person that they're trying to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yes, it's invisible alignment. You know, you just assume that the alignment is there and move forward with their best interests on both sides, and you wonder why you're both fighting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing we encountered personally with that struggle was we thought we knew each other pretty well. I mean, we had dated since college, freshman year. We were together for a long time. But what we never actually looked at was the differences in how we processed emotions, the differences in how we communicated, the differences in how we problem solved, like all of those things that they come up eventually in your marriage, but when you start working together and you bring the complexities of business in and you have kids, like all of those things, as you said, they get magnified. So that was one thing that we had to really work at, was not just we had to know ourselves better, because I think we never really did that work, but we also had to get to know our partner better, because completely different communication styles, completely different. We've taken like all these assessments and we are like opposites on every single one in our results.
Good,
oh, no wonder our conversations end in tears.
Yeah. Actually, a huge amount of the work that we do in our programs and events is teaching the differences, because when you don't understand the differences, judgment sets in, and that's where kerfuffle comes from. But when you start to understand these differences, you start to appreciate, like you're saying, the gifts that the opposite side brings to you, because they're your opposite for a reason, because there's stuff that they bring that you don't have. And when you can really appreciate that and everybody can sink into their role where their unique brilliance is, it can really flourish. But yeah, and a lot of it comes down to not only human differences, but then of course masculine and feminine differences are gigantic.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because one of the things that I think we found was early on, a lot of this stuff became easy. Like we were in college students and then we graduated and it was just us. And I think life was simpler back then. Then, we started businesses. Then we started having kids. And so suddenly we've got all these different roles going on. So when people have a lot going on, how do they make sure that they keep that relationship with their significant other solid, even though everything else is kind of going on in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to take this first?
Sure. So, again, this is just going back to the invisible alignment. When we fall in love, we just assume that we're going to see parenting the same way, right? No, right? See money the same way. There's so many other avenues for these invisible alignments that we just assumed were there to show up in different ways, and then throw on top of it the layer of masculine, feminine differences, being busy and a little burned out, quite frankly, when we have kids, for example. It takes so much of our energy. We're already struggling a little bit, maybe even to stay awake certain days, let alone that be our sharpest and best self. But these alignment conversations are similar to what Stacey had to say earlier, is, they come up in different forms. So these are just different reasons why you're going to need to have those. And in fact, when you were talking about the working together dynamics that you were having, that was just that one symptom of not having those underlying skills to have those communications and conversations around alignment and what everybody really wants, and what's being able to support each other 100% on both sides, and still achieve the outcome that you're looking for by having those strategic conversations. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What we find is that when you start doing this from a strategic perspective, a lot of the energy in a day that's going into trying to figure it out on the fly in the moment disappears. So when we take people through, how do you design your life by design, how your household, what's going on with kids, where you're going to work, how you're going to do holidays, what's going on with money. When you can design these things together outside the moment, for ways that will actually lead to fulfillment for both of you in your life by design, what your family is supposed to be, then inside the moment, there's so much more collaboration. There's so much more love and easiness that flows in a day, so that here's the thing, when days are really busy, which all of ours are, and like you said, it's so funny, the new single is married without children, because married without children to me is still like committed single. Like, it's still just about you guys. You can be when you want to, you can work where you want to, like, it's just different. But when you add businesses, when you add children, like, it's a whole different ballgame. And there's so much that comes up in a day. A lot of our energy is actually going into figuring out, well, why am I doing this? Or, well, I thought you were doing that. And when you eliminate that stuff, you can actually shift your energy into, I want to support you. I want to be with you. When I walk by you, I'm going to touch you. When he walks by me, he's going to say something completely inappropriate in my ear. Like, you can actually bring those things into your day, because you're not also trying to figure out how to run your life in your day. And then, of course, making time for conversations and having family systems so that your children are in bed by a certain time, so that you can be in bed by a certain time, being able to have caregiving so that you have date nights, and all of those things are certainly strategic tools. But if your days are running by the seat of your pants, trying to align inside the moment on the fly, those kinds of things are Band-Aids that just aren't enough. You have to set a solid, rock solid foundation.
And you want to have that relationship education too, because the things that are going to throw you out, off of your best state are the things that are off your radar. So when you're moving fast and you have these dynamics going on with the children and you're rushing for work, whatever, there's so much that's happening that without the awareness of the relationship dynamics, it's off your radar. Those are the things that are going to throw you. And then you're going to wonder why you're in such a bad mood. And we all find ourselves there until we get clarity around, I know what's triggering me here and I can see it. And it discharges that energy around it because now you can see it and you can do something about it. But what typically happens is, we start off these relationships getting married as the two single people who are now together in a marriage before kids come. And what happens, it gets progressively harder because there's more dynamics coming in that we're not aware of. So we're getting thrown off of our state and wondering why we're in a bad mood more and more often. And we're bringing that person who's not in their best state to these additional dynamics that seem to like snowball and grow. And then we just don't even know why. We find ourselves befuddled as to why we're fighting so much or why there's so many challenges, but it should just be easier. And it's really that feeling just is the symptom of not having the awareness of the relationship dynamics that are always going on. But once we can see them, you can start to unravel that. And this is sort of a spectrum of change in your ability to now show up with your best self even when the circumstances are difficult, no matter what those circumstances are, so that you successfully navigate those moments going forward, which is really what it's about, because we can't prepare for everything, but we need the skills to navigate those moments.
Well, I was going to say, and as you guys were saying that, I mean, the words strategy, alignment, awareness, clarity, what we found is, and actually Ariana can completely blame me for this, I was working with businesses for a long time. And so what I found was that those systems and structures and strategies, when we brought them home and not only applied them to our business, but also to our lives, it made things a lot simpler. So like, for example, when we take people through kind of figuring out their life, we haven't talked about core values. We haven't talked about mission. And people are like, well, this is kind of weird. Isn't this business stuff? And it's like, well, do you know the reason businesses use these? Because once everybody's aligned and we have frameworks for making decisions and we have systems in place, now to your point, instead of something coming up on the fly and we're trying to figure it out and decipher, like, how should we act in the situation? Like, for example, one of our core values is do the right thing. So if a decision comes up and we weren't expecting it, instead of like trying to navigate through all of our decision frameworks, it's like, well, what's the right thing in this scenario? Okay, we're going to do that, and then we're going to move on. Yeah. So I think a lot of people just kind of think the life stuff and the relation stuff will happen. But like, I promise you, when you put systems and intentionality in place and figure some of these things out ahead of time, it makes like navigating through the day-to-day so much easier.
Amen. Yeah. One of the things that our students go through that, like, to your point, they find like so surprising, and yet they literally with tears thank us for taking through it, is designing household systems. Like if we're both working and we both care about our kids today and we both have a house, like we kind of both have all these responsibilities today, we can't just be like on the fly figuring out what our vision of a household is supposed to be and who's going to do what. It's not really assumed like it used to be 40, 50 years ago that that's just one person's job anymore. So you actually need, like, we have a binder, an operations manual for our house. Like, I love it. How laundry gets done. This is how groceries get done. This is how household supplies get done. And this is when. And then everybody's on the same page, and it's all done outside the moment when there's not kerfuffle going on. So you're in your best self to bring it forward. And once you have that, boy, you can really live in the fun and live in a better place.
Yeah, I love that you have a standard operating manual in your house. That's awesome. We're going to have to like upgrade now and get our own. But a question that I have for you is, I know that you guys talk a lot about, if your spouse isn't willing to jump in and do this stuff, you often work with entrepreneurs that are coming into this on their own to create that better relationship and that better love life with their spouse. So how does that work when it's just the one person? Like, how do you help them kind of figure out how to show up and how to put these ideas into their relationship in a way that will make sure that they get accepted and change?
Well, you want me to start?
Yeah,
okay.
No.
So one thing I'd say is, the presupposition there is that it takes two people. And the one thing that Stacey and I, what makes this incredibly different than everything else that's out there right now, is the fact that we recognize the fact that it's never been two people. We've all sort of been fooled into believing that if my partner isn't willing to meet me halfway, then there's nothing I can do. And that's a fundamental fallacy that we've all sort of bought into because we haven't been taught by anyone else that that's actually wrong. How we're showing up is always one person, and how they show up, that's creating the dynamic that comes back to them. So I would just to simplify this by saying, just think of a relationship as a closed loop. It's between you and the other person. And how you show up, if you show up in a hostile mood, you're going to get a certain response. If you show up in a good mood, you'll get a different response. And that's a very simplified analogy for it. But the truth is, how one person shows up is always creating the dynamic of what comes back. And one person always has the power. Just like in another metaphor for this is a tug of war. Two people have to be tugging on that rope in order for that to work. But one person at any time can drop that rope and the whole dynamic stops. It's always been one person, but it looks like it's two. The truth is, how you show up with the awareness, tools, and strategies of how to bring out the best in your partner, even under difficult circumstances, for example, will create a different result. And because most people don't believe that, they don't even begin to start to go in the right direction. What we do is give the education and awareness so that you can show up in a way with the understanding, like you were saying, Tom, of that other person, so that no matter what that circumstance is, because it's a closed loop, you're going to show up in a certain way that's going to create an outcome that's actually what you want instead of what you don't want. and you have visibility to prevent something that, for example, where let's say your partner shows up in a certain way that's not helpful, that you know in the past has triggered you into some behavior you're not happy about. There's a way to recognize that as well too, and then shut that down before it continues, and not grab onto the rope and keep going back and forth, which is what typically happens, but to shift that whole dynamic on the fly as well too, and move forward. So we all have to start with awareness that it's never been two people, it's actually one, and how they show up creates the outcome on the other side, especially over time.
The thing about what we do is that actually all people come to us as individuals. Most of the time we never meet that other spouse, or we certainly don't in the beginning. It's one person who's either unhappy in their relationship and wants to do something different, but their partner's just not into it, or their partner doesn't see that there's a problem, or their partner sees that there's a problem but doesn't think anything will fix it. And that one person would otherwise be stuck if couples work was the only avenue available to them.
Yep.
And we do all of our work as individual work. When you get involved in couples work, it very often becomes a blame inside show. And it's very destructive for a relationship, because really whenever a couple is involved, that's when so what can I do better to get her to change is what really that conversation ends up being about a lot of the times. When you do individual work, you are completely blocked from trying to put the power in somebody else's hands to change your life. We are very much about you have the power within you to change anything in your life that is not the way you want it to be. You may not have had the skill set before. You may not have the tools, and maybe nobody taught you and gave you a relationship education, but it's a skill set, and it can be learned, and everybody deserves this. Mm-hmm. You don't need to get your partner on board. You don't need your partner to change at all. When you learn what you just haven't seen before, everything in the dynamic will change. Now, very often when people do that with our work, eventually we have that spouse who's like, wow, like I cannot believe how much better things are. What's that stuff you're doing? What's that video? How can I listen to some of that stuff, right? And then they are inspired to want to have a relationship development journey of their own, not do couples work, but listen on their own, get an education themselves, start showing up differently themselves, start figuring out what their triggers are themselves, and have their own journey. So that's why it's relationship development. It's personal development for your relationship.
So I'm curious, because I know for a long time, like I always tell people, a turning point for me was getting over my ego. Like everyone probably calls it something different, but I had basically a mentor that said, Tom, none of this is about you. It's really about how you can help other people. And that changed a lot of things for me. Yeah. But I know that I had to go through a lot of things, and then, had to really figure out that there was a lot of deep work I had to do before I could try doing anything else. So I'm sure when people come to you, a lot of them are probably in that mode where you said, like, they're blaming their spouse, or they're thinking someone else has to change when it's really them.
Amen.
So what do you guys do, or how do you help them see that it's really in their control and it's work they've got to do before they can go and try to do all these other things?
Yeah, there's so much and like the beginning of our 8-step system is all about perspective shift and being able to see what you haven't seen before. And so you can take any trigger like that where somebody's blaming their partner, right? Like, I don't like that tone. She uses that tone and I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of there. I've asked her 1,000,000 times to change that tone, but she won't. That is a blaming, like wanting someone else. I guarantee you your partner's not the only one who brings that tone to you, and I guarantee that you have that trigger in other aspects of your life where somebody brings a tone. And so one of the key things that we help people see with a perspective shift is you can blame your partner. You can ask them to change that for you and stop because it's hurting you. And then we're going to also have to line up your mom, your dad, your siblings, that guy at work, the neighbor, your kids, good luck. Like, we're going to have to line up everybody in the whole world and give them your whole list of triggers. Or you can just realize, you know what? I'm not going to let somebody put the leash around my neck and drag me around because I've had this trigger about a tone. I could hear anything in the world and be free, because I can show up in life as who I want to be, regardless of what anybody or anything else does, and be ready. And so I'm willing to look at what that tone means to me and pull that trigger out and be free. And I want to keep going with that. I want to understand how somebody else's blueprint sees things differently than me, how the feminine process is completely different. We're barely the same species. And I don't want to be blind to that anymore, and how the masculine processes so differently, so I can stop unknowingly emasculating people in my life, from my husband to my father to my kid to my coworker. And so when people start to see, and we use real examples, one of the benefits of Paul and I doing this together is I can teach from the feminine and Paul can teach from the masculine, and we can show it. And we use a lot of humor in our work, and people laugh because they're like, oh my God, like that.
That's me.
All the time, yeah.
When you start to see that in reality, and then you start to see, now if I were to show up differently without trying to be right and without holding on to my righteousness, thinking that's somehow going to enact justice in this balance or whatever it is, when I really show up from compassion, heartfelt understanding like I would with someone who's maybe not my spouse right now, what kind of result would I get that's different? And who do I really want to be? Because it's my relationship, right? I either have to live in it or live through leaving it. And everything you do in your relationship is either building your relationship up or breaking your relationship down. And when you have visibility that there are things that you have no idea that you're doing that are causing the relationship to break down, most people want to learn that and stop it right away. And when they feel the power of that, then it's like we're on fire, and then there's nothing stopping them.
And you know, Tom, too, like you said the key, which is you took personal responsibility, right? You said, I looked at me. And what happens is, and it's common across the board. So anybody listening, it's not your fault. I get it. But this is what we do, right? Is in a moment, we don't like the way somebody treated us or something that happened. So we blame them, right? Instead of taking personal responsibility, we blame them. And what we say around here is, with blame, is kind of like, what we do is the moment you blame, you've in effect given all of your power to transform that situation over to the other person, handed it to them, and then we sit back and we wait, and we say, I'm going to sit here until you fix this for me, right? And we wait, watch the seasons go by, we get older, and the other person doesn't fix it for us. We've handed all the power over to them because it was their fault. Therefore, there's nothing for us to do. And guess what? In that moment, the challenge happened because we needed something. We needed to grow in someone. So we missed our opportunity to grow by handing all that power to someone else to fix it for us because we thought it was their fault. And then we render ourselves helpless and unresourceful to actually make a difference. And we missed the gift that was meant for us, so we don't have to repeat it, because the life has a funny way of, if you don't get the lesson the first time, it comes back bigger, hairier, and scarier until we get it, right? So the art is learning to do that earlier. And you did the number one thing, which is stop blaming the other person. Start by looking at what you can do to make this better. What was your role in this to help shift that dynamic? And we've been instinctively doing everything backwards, and we need to start reversing that, just because, again, no one's been showing us the way out. And that's where these little things add up.
I was going to say, and for anyone listening, rewind back the last couple of minutes and re-listen to that, because that really is the starting point for so much of this. And, it pains me when I see somebody get triggered by something and the other person, they may be off and gone, but that person holds on to that for years. And like you said, not realizing that there's an opportunity for them to be able to learn from that, understand why that happens, and then move beyond it. Because guess what? That other person doesn't care anymore, but you're letting yourself kind of hold on to that pain. And it could be relationships. I mean, I've seen it in business too. Like there was someone the other day was like, I work with this person. They just did like a chargeback. What should I do? And so I'm like, well, how much is it? They're like, oh, it's only a little bit of money, but they wronged me, so I'm going to do everything I can. And I'm like, not telling you what to do, but just take a step back. And is that being right or getting that money worth the anxiety and everything else? Or are you better off letting that go on to what you want to be?
Yes.
But people, like I said, kind of like you guys said earlier, once you kind of see it, it's like the Matrix. You start seeing it everywhere. And
That's right.
I want to help all you guys because you're in so much pain, but you don't need to be.
Yes. Paul says that all the time.
And that's what
so
drives
much like the Matrix.
And honestly, it's hard at times to see so much of it.
Because you can't not see.
There's only so much you can do in a day or a year, but it's just like that.
It is, and that's why we're so committed, because most good people, they just want the answer. If you give them the answer, they'll be like, why would I keep doing something that's causing us pain? Yeah, it might be tough work for a little while, because sometimes we have to face things. And people often have to get over the whole, because I take personal responsibility doesn't mean it's my fault. It doesn't mean it's my fault. But I sure as heck have the ability to fix this and improve my quality of life. So I will. And so it takes some work. And all that personal work was for us anyway. Right. But when you give people the answers, which is just all what we're about, just simple, real tools in the toolbox that anybody can pull out and use in any situation. I mean, people want that, and I think people deserve it. Like so many people, we're just done with all this unnecessary suffering. We don't want to put our kids through this. We don't want to be the example of what not to do for our kids. We want to be their example of what a role model is. And, Paul and I are very big on that. We really want to flip the switch on this disposable relationship society that we've all been handed. And the way we do that is by doing this so that what they see is this, so they won't need me when they're 40 to unravel their crap.
I love that. And I just want to go back to that one point where you were talking about couples therapy. And, we've come across quite a few people who have been, they've tried couples therapy and it hasn't worked for them. And I know that this is first of all, it's a huge taboo subject. So it's not even okay to talk about couples therapy these days, even though it's perfectly normal to go and want to improve your relationship. And, we're in it and it's working for us, but I know there are people that it doesn't work for. And I love that you guys are offering a different option. It's giving people a choice to say, okay, well, my spouse doesn't want anything to do with couples therapy, but I want to improve our relationship. Now they have somewhere to go to do that. And I absolutely love that you guys are helping people, take on that responsibility of themselves and who they're showing up to be. So thank you guys for giving such a great service to everyone out there. And I'm looking forward to checking out some of your stuff as well, because we're all for improvement in all areas. But I would love to hear from you guys. What was the one thing that you want listeners to take away from kind of everything we talked about today? And you can each give one if you want.
You want to go?
I'll start. I mean, if I were to give you one thing, I would start today by stopping the reflex of blaming. The moment you feel that instinct inside and that sort of energy coming up, learn to start shutting that off and start asking yourself a different question of, what can I do in a situation to make it better? What is my personal responsibility? Start looking inward, just as you said, Tom. That would be the number one thing I'd say start with right there, because you'll start to see things a little differently, kind of like you do after you've had a few days to cool down after some big blowout, and you start to see things differently. When you start to stop that in a moment, you'll start to change things right off the bat. So.
Awesome. I would say that there's more than just hope. Some people are looking for hope that something can get better. And I just want to say, after saving over 10,000 marriages and helping tens of thousands more, there's more than just hope. It's proven. You can do this. Whatever healing your family needs, whether it's saving a marriage or bringing passion back to a great marriage or divorce-proofing an awesome marriage or even healing a co-parenting relationship so you can create your family by design, whatever it is, you can have this. There's nothing wrong with you. You didn't pick wrong. It's just that nobody has ever given you a relationship education with tools and strategies that work for real families, but you deserve it. You can have it. It's just a skill set, and it can be learned.
I love it. All right. And where can people come and find you guys? Because I know they're going to want to after hearing this episode.
Well, we're doing a relationship breakthrough secrets web class. So you can, if you want to join us, it's a 2-hour class, like packed with tools and strategies. We would love for you to join us on that class. You can go to relationshipbreakthroughsecrets.com to sign up for that. And anything you need to find us, you can find us at relationshipdevelopment.org.
Awesome. And we will be sure to put all of those in the show notes, which you can find at tomandariana.com/84. All right, you guys, it's been another amazing episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders. And we want to extend a huge thank you to you, Stacey and Paul, for coming on the show and just sharing all of your awesome knowledge and funny stories. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Oh, my gosh.
It's truly a pleasure. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. And for everyone listening, just remember, it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Awesome.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. And just a reminder, as a special offer during this super special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. Sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the promo code LBcouples. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.